Welcome. Today I am going to talk about the concept of the balance of power in a relationship, and specifically in the dating marketplace. I have alluded to and I have talked about this previously, but I thought perhaps this might be a good opportunity to re-emphasize or reaffirm some of the concepts and some of the recommendations that I made in the prior sessions. Now let me begin with perhaps a walk down memory lane and share some of my childhood or experiences from my 20s and even before my 20s. My understanding of relationships, like most people's understanding of relationships, has come from a number of avenues: observation, lived experience, study, learning, listening to people who have had both good and bad experiences. And I've always been fascinated with and about relationships, right from when I was very young. I noticed very early in even before my teenage period, but early in my teenage days, that the most attractive women, the most attractive girls, were desired by both men in my age range, in my age group, and let's say these women were in the same age group as myself. They were designed by men who were in my age group, all the way up to men who were old enough to be their fathers, and sometimes older than their fathers. I was friends with some of these girls, but not in an intimate way. Perhaps some of them we grew up in the same neighborhood, or we went to the same schools. I noticed something that happened early days, which was it was hard for the woman or the girl to turn down a proposal from a man who had what we back in the day thought was a lot of wealth. I also found that boys who were in the same age group found it very hard to get dates from these girls once there was another man who had more means or came to the table with a lot more options than we had. After all, we were simply teenagers. Now, I observed this across my teenage age, and as I went into my 20s, the same things happened. I had friends, and I knew friends of mine who were besides themselves, head over heels for a number of girls, but they couldn't get a date. Some of them were lucky to get dates, but it came with very high expectations. Some people I knew borrowed money, stole money from their parents, just to take a girl on a date, an expensive date, to buy her things for access, primarily sex, or to become a boyfriend. Now, I knew a number of people who would steal from their siblings, steal from their parents, to make up what they had already saved as a way of winning the woman or winning the girl over. Sometimes they saved for months, and sometimes they saved for much longer. The point was that they were willing to do whatever it took to win favor in the eyes of these girls. Certainly these girls were very attractive. There were the ones amongst our peer group who were considered the most attractive. There were some boys and some of my friends who were willing to do whatever they could do, either to get a date or to get some form of romantic reciprocity from the women, from the girls. I never partook of this, not because I didn't want to, of course I did, but I was raised in a family where we didn't have a lot of means. For example, my father was a great guy. I knew how much we had in the whole family every time We all did. My father would call each and every one of us and say, listen, if something happens during the day and you need money, here in my room, here in this briefcase, that is what we have. But use it wisely. And in many ways, that started what I think was the foundation to my perception of how I value money. We were relatively economically challenged. We had a good life in terms of we didn't lack for the character traits and the love and the presence and the togetherness and that one would need from a father and a mother. Economically, we struggled. There were days when if you had a meal twice in a day, that was a great day. And that just to give you some context. Things were not necessarily the best. So the idea of taking money from the briefcase or taking money that I had saved and spend that on a date or on a gift for a girl who gives you a hug or a kiss at the end of the night was something that I never understood, was something I was never willing to explore. Certainly, I desired the same women that my friends did, especially the beautiful ones, but I could not afford those women. So I focused my time and my attention on what I thought was the cheapest use of my time, which was study, my education, personal development, and just being a young boy and playing around. And along the way, if I was able to find something, some form of female entertainment that cost almost nothing, I embraced it with open arms. In the prior session, I said something which was that men and women play a game that is at odds with each other. Men want the most amount of sex, more quantity, more variety, and they want to give up the least amount of resources in exchange. Women, on the other hand, want to give up the least amount of sex, but they want to get the most amount of resources, power, money, influence, fame, access to opportunities, but they want to give as little as possible because they understand the game that men are playing. Whoever wins that game wins. And therefore, sex in many ways is more like a commodity. You want to pay the least possible if you were a man. Generally, most men want a woman who is the most attractive, but who has the least amount of maintenance cost or initial cost of acquisition, however you define acquisition. A woman who is very attractive, not demanding of our time, not demanding of our resources. It's a jackpot. We want multiple of those. So every day we search for such a scenario. Unfortunately, we do not find that. But ideally, a man wants a woman who is very, very beautiful, easy to get along with, costs very little. So going back to the story of my childhood, I knew boys back then who sold their personal items, who sold their loved ones' personal items, who stole simply because they thought the only way they could get access to the girl they actually fancied was through gifts. These girls were conditioned to expect resources. And rightly so, I should say that very clearly. I have done a session where I say, beauty has a cost, and those who have beauty should be very wise about how they use that beauty. You want to get as much as you can if you are a woman. Play the game intelligently, and play the game in such a way that you get what you want in exchange for whatever you think is fair. You've heard me say before, all is fair in love and sex. Dating is war. Whoever plays the game the best wins. Now, this brings me down to today's conversation, which is about the balance of power. The structure of every relationship, male and female, in a heterosexual relationship, is such that for the women, the older a woman gets, she has less of what men generally want, which is beauty, youth, and access to sex. The older a man gets, the man has more what women want, which is resources, power, money, fame, influence, and a network. So women, the younger you are, the more valuable you are in the dating marketplace, and even more importantly, in the marriage marketplace. Two separate marketplaces, but both still interconnected. We begin in the dating marketplace, we transition into the marriage marketplace. The dating marketplace did not exist prior to the 1930s and 1940s. People simply moved from introduction to marriage. There was only one marketplace. We've liberalized a lot of sexual mores, and we've made things easy. We've given people liberation and empowerment and freedom, so people today choose. And we have settled for what people believe is a more reliable approach to having a fulfilling experience, which is to date first, and then if you choose to get married or to couple with someone. So I have said before that there are two marketplaces, the dating marketplace and the marriage marketplace, or the partnership marketplace. In the dating marketplace, men simply want sex. Therefore, the younger a woman is, the more attractive she is to men. Between 18 and 35, a woman has 18 long or short years to maximize what she gets in return in the short term, and more importantly, in the long term. I have said in many ways, and many a times, there is no rush for a woman to jump into marriage. It's important for you to find yourself, discover yourself, before you commit. Similarly, and this brings me to today's session, I also say to young men, the younger you are, the less power you have in that game. The balance of power is with the woman. So a young man who is 25 has potential. He has not achieved anything besides his academic achievement. But all of those academic degrees has not been or will not be necessary to pay the bills, to buy the flowers, to take out the woman or the girl on dates. Your human capital is something that is built over time. At some point in the future, that human capital is transcribed or is traded in for financial capital, financial resources, which you then take into the investment landscape, and you can acquire assets, you can acquire commodities, collectibles, or you can acquire any form of investment you desire, with the intent being that you can compound your wealth so that in the future you're able to live a meaningful life to a standard that meets your expectations. So the younger you are as a young man, the less power you have, the less you have to offer. And this applied to me, going back to the story I started with. I had nothing to offer apart from perhaps charm and good looks, and perhaps the subtle nuances that come with being a young man. And that means I took what was offered to me, but I never gave or made promises beyond my capabilities or beyond the family's capabilities, because the family's wealth was my wealth. I couldn't take, no matter how small, to pay for a date, because I realized that that would potentially cost us a meal for the day. And if we were only going to have one meal that day, it wasn't a really smart idea to go and feast with a woman and then starve with the family. So I never really, and I was never conditioned into paying for extravagant dates and going for expensive meals. Now, I'm going to give you a few shocking facts. And I hope these are not shocking facts, but when I say this, even amongst my friends who are my age group, older or younger, they seem quite surprised. Here are some facts. Before I turned 35, I had never bought flowers for a woman. I make that recommendation to young boys to say, love can wait until you're mature enough to know what you're giving flowers for. I have only bought flowers for one woman, the missus. One woman in my entire life. I've never bought roses or flowers for anyone but one woman, and I did not do that prior to being 35. I've never bought champagne or bottles of champagne in clubs or bars. I've never spent a lot of money in restaurants or bars, or there's certain things I do not do because I grew up with a respect, a reverence for the value of time and the value of money, which is simply a derivative of time. And most of the things I see, I go out with friends and they pay for me to go into very expensive bars and clubs. And they buy champagnes and they buy drinks, and sometimes I turn it down because it's not necessarily my drink. But I can see them buying drinks for people they meet in the club or in the bars who are strangers. And all of that splashing of money is simply a way of signaling to the woman that they are the right choice. And I have seen and I've witnessed the woman make that selection based on what she's seen, the drinks in the clubs, the cars my friends drive, and it makes it look very, very attractive. Similarly, I have also seen in the same clubs, in the same bars, women who have boyfriends, younger boys, and these are women in their 20s, who are there in the clubs with their boyfriends, give out their numbers to some of these men who are in their 30s, but who have a lot of wealth, or who have made something of themselves, or who have shown in a short space of time the willingness to spend. And my view is, now there are exceptions to the rule, but women are drawn to men who have the ability to provide, or men who are able to convince, whether that be true or not, convince the woman that they can still provide. So whether you own a car that is very expensive or you rent a car that is very expensive, no one really asks for the title deeds. Simply, people just look at the car, and as long as you're driving the car, it has an effect. And what this simply means is men have been conditioned to think that there's a necessity for them to, especially young men, to spend what they do not have. For many reasons, we have a desire to be longed for and to be wanted. I have a feeling, and this is perhaps not a feeling shared by many people, that dating is simply a more of a glorified form of prostitution. Same as marriage. You indirectly tell me what you want, and I shower you with gifts and money and travel and experiences, and in exchange you give me access to your body. Same as marriage. And at the end of the marriage, if it doesn't work out well, I also get to pay you for the past use of that access I once enjoyed, even though I no longer have it. I still keep paying in the form of alimony for something I still have no access to. And so, one of the important decisions a man has to make, and a young man, is how to be disciplined during that early stage of your life so that you don't make the mistakes that most young men make. Now, that mistake is not something that is insurmountable, but it is very significant. And that mistake usually is that between 18 and 35, you will date and you will attempt to date multiple women. Unfortunately, you will not be successful. Some are better skilled at playing the game of dating than you are. Women mature much faster than men, and men unfortunately think sometimes that they are clever without realizing that the woman is very, very, very cunning. In any case, you will have so many dates in that 18-year period. My experience, and the experiences I've observed, and generally speaking, the data suggests, especially when you consider that the average age of marriage for women in the United Kingdom, as of today, is 35. The average age of the man or the Brit in the UK is 35. People are delaying marriage until 35. So technically speaking, between 18 and 35, in 18 years, having dated so many women, none of those relationships will amount to anything. You will not end up married to any of those women. So technically speaking, you've simply wasted all your money, a lot of your time, and all of your resources. Now, some of that money, some of that time, is a natural part of living, interacting with people and socializing. However, a lot of it is wasted, which is what I try to get across to young men when I say, between 18 and 35, if you stay focused on your dreams, on your goals, on your ambitions, on creating a future that will be bright, if you can stay focused on that dream, looking neither to the left or to the right, there is a very high possibility that once you turn 35 and above, not only would you be able to afford more women, if that's what you want, but you'll be able to choose because the balance of power will shift. At 18, you have ambition and you have potential. In the United Kingdom, potential is wasted every single day. Everyone has potential. By God. Think about that. Judas had potential. Lucifer had potential. Saddam Hussein had potential. He could have led a different life. Everyone has potential. Not every potential is realized because potential is wasted every single day. And more than anything, one of the reasons people waste potential is because they are lured into a false sense of security. You meet a woman, you fall in love with her. You give up on your dreams because you want a night of passion. You want a month of passion. You want a memory that you want to last a lifetime. And so people, young men, fail to see beyond the present. We think with our little head rather than our big head. And sometimes we pay a big price. And that price sometimes is a different life. We either settle too soon for the nearest woman who says, I'll accept your date proposal at 22. And by heavens, you get so excited that at 27, you decide to get married. And she wants to get married at 27 because she is still at sexual prime. You, on the other hand, have just sacrificed your dream for marriage, which means you will never be what you potentially could be had you stayed focused. So here are some of my remarks for today, which is, yes, you have needs as a young man. Between 18 and 35, you will have sexual needs. I don't preach the moral position, and I don't talk about the moral position for many reasons. There are so many things I've done once, and there are more things that I have done twice. So I take no position in terms of morality. Young boys and young girls are dating at the age of 12. So it's not for me to say you should not date. That need has to be satisfied. It's my responsibility to tell you how you can have that need satisfied without compromising on your dreams. I think that's a fair task to take on. My perspective is simple. 95% of your time, your energy, should be focused on your dreams. Between 18 years, all the way up to 35 years. You want to be focused on becoming the best person you can be in your area of study. You want to become the best student. You want to transition from the student position to the best employee, the best worker, the most competent person in your firm, and the best skilled for that talent. And if you can translate that into wealth, You want to be recognized and known to be exceptionally good in one thing, and let that become a pathway to your riches. To do that, 95% of your time needs to be dedicated towards your goals, your dreams, your future. So you should not be in a mono relationship before age 30, and certainly you should not consider marriage until age 35. You should not have kids out of wedlock, certainly not until age 35. You should not consider getting married until you have achieved your dreams, if you are a man. You should not move in with a woman or live with a woman until at least age 30, preferably 35. 30 is when you start the consideration of all of those familial interactions. You should not date single mothers, primarily because there's a responsibility that comes with that woman. And my intention is between 18 years and 35, I want you to be irresponsible in all areas and fully responsible towards your goal and dream. Do not take on responsibility of another. Now, this does not mean you should be unhelpful. Help as much as you can, but you're not a father yet. It's still too early. Do not date people who have pets, because in today's day and age, it's like having a child. You want to be free. You want to be free and nimble so that if opportunities come, you can get up and you can go. That is what I did in my life. Opportunities came, I packed my bag, and I said to my loved ones and to my family, I have to go. And I left. I could do that only because I had no kids. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have a family. I didn't have any obligations that held me down. So opportunities come at the most rare of moments. You have to be able to take it. And relationships kill our dreams because they stop you from taking those opportunities. 95% of your time should be focused on that dream. The remaining 5% of your time can be dedicated to chasing tail, as I call it, having that need met. Now, if you've listened to everything I've said, it means that between 18 and say all the way up to about 30, you have 5% of your time only on a daily basis. If you sum all of the days of the week, 7 days, that 5% amounts to about 2.5 hours every week. That's all you have to play. You want to play and get the most variety, the highest quantity, at the cheapest price. And my view is, the younger you are in your 20s, you should not be dating women in your 20s because they come with a very high price tag. You should be dating women who are above 35, primarily because those are the same women who used to be the very attractive ones who held out too long and are now desperate for relationships. But they've acquired some level of success in the work environment, and therefore they can pay for your date. I have no issues with you dating older women because you can have their needs met, which is for bond and connection, and you can have your needs met, which is simply sex. And it can be done in a mature way where you're not being asked to commit to anything. She wants sex and you want sex. It's a mutual exchange. It's cheaper because, generally speaking, when a woman gets to that age, she's not necessarily looking to be caught dining with someone who is 15 years younger than she is, or 10 years younger than she is. She simply wants sex. So you don't have to spend all that money as though you were courting the woman. So with these two options, you can still have your cake and eat it. The idea being, you sow the seeds for 18 years, and when you turn 35, something magical usually happens. The women who were the most attractive in your 20s, who perhaps would not have gone on dates with you, when you see them at age 35, there's a feeling of satisfaction you have, because now you can afford to pay for the dates, you can afford to go on lovely experiences and pay and court a woman correctly and buy her gifts and make her feel special. But you're doing that with the intention of marriage. You're doing that with the intention of a serious relationship. But more importantly, you're doing it with a balance of power on your side now. Because at 35, you can now afford to date women all the way from their 20s up to 35. Something that you could never have done previously. So, in conclusion, men, you need to use and make time a friend, because time is there to serve you. But first you have to sow the seeds of patience and sacrifice. And from 35 and above, you can reap the benefits of both having the resources and having the options of the variety of women you can choose from. Interestingly, if you were 35 years and you were dating a woman who's 25, both of you have an equal amount of power. Your resource is solid, her beauty and youth are solid, and therefore both parties can come to the conversation in a respectable manner, in good faith and peaceably. Now, I hope that's been useful.